On the flips, if I could ask one more quick question, on the flip side of that, from the Florida State perspective, obviously we talked about how Florida State's been dealing with injuries of late. Trayshawn Ward was back out practice. Mike Norvell said he's been making improvements. Hasn't been saying much about Fabian Lovett, how Fabian Lovett still seems to be a little behind. With what Florida State has ahead of them, looking past Georgia Tech for a moment, when you have Miami, at Syracuse, and Florida in 3 of the final 4 games, seeing what you have with Georgia Tech, and I'm not trying to disrespect Georgia Tech in any way, do you maybe sit a couple guys who are a little bit dinged up, knowing that you're going to need all hands on deck for Miami, for Syracuse, and for Florida?
I don't think you do that because you kind of already started the Wake Forest game off like that. If you looked at Jerry Verse didn't start the Wake Forest game off, but he eventually came back in kind of on a pitch count. You need to go ahead and establish dominance. If anything, knock them out early and then let those guys get those early reps in. I think that's the way you go and do it. Maybe Trayshawn Ward isn't your starter because you're getting enough from Trey Benson and Lawrence Toafili, but you weave him in so that he's getting game reps again. One of the things when you're coming off of injury, you want to know how you're going to respond to a hit. I remember when I had my when I had my labrum surgery, I didn't get a chance to engage in physicality until fall camp. I had that in February 13th, 2004. I didn't get a chance to hit anybody until like the middle of August of 2004. And the first thing you want to do is you just want to get that first hit out the way so you can know how you're going to respond and how you're going to feel. So I think it's easier to get that out of the way against a Georgia Tech and get in game shape as opposed to, you're waiting against Miami in a game that's a little bit more intense because more is on the line as far as pride and bragging rights and state recruiting than playing against Georgia Tech, who, even though they're the same spot, it's just Miami, the logo holds different than Georgia Tech's logo.
This Georgia Tech team, they're playing for something now, so I'm not going to put that past them. And so, James can relate to this and tell us what happened in that locker room to a certain extent, because you got Jeff Collins, and they lost 13 consecutive ACC games. They'd lost 10 consecutive FBS games. They show him the door. They bring in Key. I can't remember his first name, but the offensive line coach takes over. They didn't turn into Alabama overnight or anything, but they go from being completely pathetic to they beat a pretty decent Duke team in overtime. They beat Pitt. And then if Jeff Sims would have played, I watched that game against Virginia as well. That was just an ugly game. And it wasn't ugly just because most people think low scoring means ugly. No, it was just ugly because Jeff Sims gets hurt. The backup was not ready for that moment. Really late in the game, actually started to feel it a little bit and started to sling it, and he got comfortable and led them down the field. But they had receivers dropping the ball left and right. But they've somehow, whatever this offensive line coach has found there, they're playing with a little motivation now.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're not going up against dead bodies. There is a sense of pride that a lot of people have, but again, that pride gets taken out when you kind of go out there and bash men. You're like, oh my God, here it is. There's some things that you can always say. It's called like the game got away from you really quick. So basically you're just kind of getting thrown in there. But I will say that was impressive what the young guy was able to do later on in the game. But what I also noticed is later on in the game is that those guys' body language was just like, if we win, we win. If we don't, we don't. Not the quarterback. Other people lining up slow in a no-huddle situation. And even the young man's inability to understand where the game was. And because I remember commenting on it. Like,
the last play of the game?
It's the last play of the game. Like, why are you running out of bounds? Like, there's just – if you throw an interception at this point, who cares? But chuck it up, give yourself a chance. Yeah. It reminded me of what Tate Rodemaker did in the practice here in Jacksonville, and Mike Norvell jumped his ass because they were doing situationals, and he ran out of bounds. He was like, why would you run out of bounds? There's no time left on the clock. It makes no sense, but it's just kind of – that's just what I mean. They do. Everybody should – I know fans don't care. I haven't asked our players because, hell, they haven't been to one in so long. Bowl games are fun. Shreveport, Louisiana might not be fun, but Miami, Jacksonville is probably more fun now than it was when I played. New Orleans, Atlanta, all these different Charlotte, all these different places that you can go to experience are good. And so you are playing for a bowl berth. If you could get to a bowl game, these coaches are coaching for that. Because imagine if he's basically on an audition. If he can make this team into a bowl eligible team after what they came off of, maybe they'll be kicking themselves and trying to figure out what the hell went wrong with Collins and what can you do better, as opposed to bringing in an outside entity like a Deion Sanders was rumored and other people. But I just don't see it. And it's still too quick, because you still got guys you had for however long he was there. You had a wing T offense. I don't think people understand how different that is from the rest of college football. You have 260 and 200 to 285 pound offensive linemen that pull and cut. You don't recruit wide receivers that can run the entire route tree. You recruit wide receivers that can run post, curls, and go routes. That's basically and then some drag. Tight ends that run drags. And you recruit a bunch of different running backs. That's an entirely different offensive system than what Jeff Collins came in. And I think he made a mistake with trying to come in and flip it too quick. But at the end of the day, that's what Georgia Tech was. And it's unfortunate, but it's going to take a little while to get rid of that.